Ladies and gentlemen, those of you who are familiar with the ways of Temenos know that we light a candle to begin our proceedings for reasons that you can imagine yourselves. Welcome to you all, and thank you for coming to this lecture, which carries a heavy and demanding responsibility in its title, What is Truth? But before we dwell on that further, I want to firstly warmly welcome Brother Martin, who's travelled many leagues to come and be our speaker tonight. You're most welcome. Thank you for taking the trouble to come and talk to us, and thank you for the work that I know has gone into your talk. We meet under the name of the Temenos Academy, and those of you who are Greek scholars will know, I'm sure, that Temenos simply means in Greek a place cut off from common usage, a place sometimes dedicated to a spirit or to a god, and sometimes just to a mystery, sometimes possibly just a place of silence where we may contemplate more profoundly upon our lives and upon our world. So, true to our name, this is what we seek to do in Temenos through our lectures and the courses that we run under the banner of the name of the Temenos Academy. And this is what we seek to do tonight, to be thoughtful about the nature of truth, what that means to us individually and collectively. And bearing that in mind, what could possibly be more fitting that we should ask Brother Martin to come and talk to us. Now, many of you who have been on the road for more than a few decades will be familiar with the name of Brother Martin's most distinguished predecessor, Father Bede Griffiths, who founded the great ashram at Shantivaram in South India, not far from Bangalore, and who did so much valuable and inspiring work to introduce and illuminate to each other the two great spiritual traditions of Christianity and the Hindu tradition. And this is the sort of work that lies at the absolute heart of what we seek to do in Temenos. We seek to show how a seamless reality manifests itself through the world in different spiritual traditions and thoughts. And like Bede Griffiths before him, Brother Martin also comes from that great order of spiritual discipline, work, thought, and worship, the order of St. Benedict. Brother Martin has really spent his life in this tradition, although as a seminarian up to the age of about 30, when he decided to join, at the invitation of Bede Griffiths, the order of Benedict. And so he has spent almost his entire life, certainly the last 27 years, in the ashram at Shantivaram. And I think that fact speaks its own truth, which will come out in his talk. Now, Brother Martin will speak for an hour, well, actually just under an hour, and then we shall have time for questions. We're booted out fairly ceremoniously from these luxurious lecture rooms by 8:15, so I'm afraid we shall have to be brutal and cut you off in midstream as far as that is concerned. So there's no more to do except to hand you over to Brother Martin, who will outline his ideas on what is truth. Thank you.
So, good evening to you all. I'm very happy to be with you this evening to share with you some thoughts on this theme, what is truth. And I'm very grateful to Sir Nick Pearson, and Temenos Academy, who have invited me this evening to be with you. And as Nick said, that I come from a Christian ashram founded by Catholic priest 60 years ago, which is dedicated to inner spiritual journey and also dialogue between religions, particularly between Hinduism and Christianity. And I was very fascinated by this vision, and so I had to leave my diocese before I was being ordained as a priest, because I wanted to pursue in this path of dialogue between religions. So I'm there since 27 years. And today I share with you in a brief way, what I have discovered in my search for this understanding the nature of truth. And it is only just for me, because that gives me a kind of peace within my heart when I see things in this way. But I just want to share with you. You know that Jesus told to Pilate, I came to bear witness to the truth. And Pilate asked him, what is truth? And Jesus was silent. He did not give any answer. And today I just want to propose a kind of answer, what might have been the answer of Jesus to the question of Pilate. Now the purpose of every revelation is to reveal who human beings are and how they have to live their life in the world of time and space. Who we are and how we have to live our life in the world of time and space. And of course the way God reveals to human beings also depends the level of consciousness in which they are, psychologically, scientifically, theologically. Everything depends on the level of human consciousness in a particular time and space. The way we understand God is different. But somehow the human consciousness is continuously growing in divine-human relationship. Revelations are not something static, but revelation is something always growing. And now I just want to, today it is very common to divide the spiritual traditions into two categories, wisdom tradition and the prophetic tradition. Religions like Hinduism, Buddhism, Jainism, Taoism, they belong to the wisdom tradition. And religions like Judaism, Christianity, Islam and Baha'i, they belong to prophetic tradition. And this is a very, very important division to make, because it will help us to understand the uniqueness of each spiritual tradition, the way they understand God, experience God, and also the limitations of each spiritual tradition, so that we can build a kind of bridge between these two traditions. And for me, the future of our spiritual evolution depends on the marriage of these two spiritual traditions, the wisdom tradition and the prophetic tradition. Now from the wisdom tradition, we are going to take Hinduism, and from the biblical tradition, the prophetic tradition, we are going to focus on the vision of Christ, or I would prefer to say vision of Christ, not Christianity, because today I discover Christianity is not identical with Jesus Christ. Okay? Christian belief systems are different interpretations of the message of Christ, but I have not seen any Christian belief system which really approximates to the vision of Jesus Christ. So I would say rather the vision of Jesus Christ rather than Christianity. And of course the same thing applies to Hinduism also, because Hinduism is not one religion, it is a congregation of many religions. Within the label of Hinduism there are so many belief structures, but all call themselves Hindus. And so again, so it's going back to the Vedic vision of the Vedic tradition, not just Hinduism as a religion. So first we focus on the Vedic tradition. The Vedic tradition is based on the 4 Vedas. The 4 Vedas are the sacred scriptures of Hinduism, and they are called Shruti. Shruti means a direct revelation. Revelation. And the Upanishads are the concluding portion of the Vedic tradition, and that is why the Upanishads are called Vedanta. Vedanta means the end of the Veda. There is nothing to go beyond. But the revelation in the Vedic tradition is not like in the prophetic tradition where God reveals to human beings His will or His commandments, but it is the discovery of the human consciousness about the eternal truth. So there is a constant search in the human heart and coming to see the truth. They were more like scientists. Scientists were trying to understand the nature of the truth, and they come to realization of the truth. Okay. And in the Vedic tradition, the relationship between God and the human beings has grown continuously. I just draw the picture of a mountain just as a symbol.
I think we're going to have to move that.
Okay.
Because people can't see it. Can we put it on your right?
Okay, yes, you can put it there. Thanks. Okay. So in the Vedic tradition, the relationship between God and the human beings has grown continuously for thousands of years. The first divine-human relationship can be described as a nature worship. Nature worship. In the initial stages, God is any phenomenon on which human beings had no control. And so the human beings were dependent upon the nature, the elements of nature. So they began to worship nature as God. So it is nature, like the water, the wind, the fire, the sky, all these become a divine for them. And so they began to worship the nature as God. And then slowly they began to personify the natural forces by giving names to them. For example, water, they gave the name Varuna, or Up, the god of the water, or Agni, the god of the fire. And then we have Vayu, the god of the wind, and then Indra, the god of the sky. So when they began to personify the natural forces, they moved from nature worship into polytheism. And polytheism is a belief in many gods. The water is God, the fire is God, the wind is God, the sky is God. So there are many gods. And slowly they began to realize, okay, there are many gods, but there must be one God, a kind of leader to the other gods. And so from polytheism, they moved a system called henotheism. Henotheism is an understanding in which one god acts like a leader over the other gods, but not permanently, but the position can be changed. And that is why in the Vedas we see sometimes one god is glorified over the other gods, but then only temporarily other gods takes over and they glorify the other god. And Professor Max Muller coined this word henotheism to describing the phenomenon of the Vedic experience. But then they were not satisfied with this henotheism. They said there must be only one God. There must be only one God who is the supreme being, who is the creator of this universe. So they moved from henotheism into monotheism. There is a famous statement in the Vedas. It says, Ekam Sat Vipra Bahuti Vadanti. Ekam Sat Vipra Bahuti Vadanti. Ekam means one. Sat means a self-existing being. A being whose existence doesn't depend upon the other. So self-existing being is only one. That means God is only one. There is only one God. And the whole creation is creation of this one God, but there are not many gods, but there is only one God. And so they moved from henotheism into monotheism. And then the research did not end with this. They began to ask questions. Okay, there is only one God. How did the creation come? Whether God created this universe from what? From something or from nothing? Somehow they rejected the theory, creation out of nothing. They said nothing will come out of nothing. So if the creation does not come from nothing, it's not coming from something. From where it comes? It comes from God. It comes from God. God is like the spider, and the creation is like the web of the spider. And so it is coming from God. And somehow it is essentially one with God, functionally different, but essentially one with God. So if it is coming from God, then creation is also divine. It is the manifestation of the divine. And so they gave a famous statement, Sarvam Kalvidam Brahma. Sarvam Kalvidam Brahma. That means the whole creation is the manifestation of the divine. So they moved from monotheism, and we can describe it not absolutely like pantheism, in the sense that not everything is God, because if everything is God, then there will be two gods. No, there is only one God, but creation is the manifestation of the divine. Everything is the manifestation of the divine. But again, their research did not stop with this understanding. They said, what is ultimate relationship, creation and God? They said, ultimately, the human consciousness is one with the divine. The human consciousness is one with the divine. Aham Brahma Asmi. I am Brahman. Atman is Brahman, and Brahman is Atman. The Brahman is the ground of the creation, and the Atman is the ground of the individual consciousness, but ultimately Atman is Brahman and Brahman is Atman. So they went even beyond pantheism, and we can describe it as monism, but not in absolute sense, to show that ultimately there is only God, and everything comes from God and goes back to that one God. And this is the great achievement of the Upanishadic sages. 500 years before Christ, the great achievement of the Upanishadic sages is discovering that the human consciousness is ultimately one with the divine consciousness. And so the question is at that level, who is a human being? The human being is ultimately one with the divine. Okay? And so this happened 500 years before Christ. Okay? Now I want to stop there, and I want to go to the biblical tradition. And also to see the development that has taken place in the biblical tradition in the divine-human relationship. Now, according to the scholars, the initial stage of the divine-human relationship in the prophetic tradition, in the Hebrew tradition, is called totemism. Totemism is a kind of relationship with God in which human beings consider a particular object, like a plant, like an animal, or a stone, or something, a sacred object, and they relate with God with this sacred object, and this sacred object becomes something which they don't want to kill. For example, you have a sacred animal, you don't kill that animal because it represents the divine. That seems to be the original source of the spiritual in the spiritual experience in the prophetic tradition. And from there they move into polytheism. It is a belief in many gods, and it is not my personal view, but we also have the scholars who affirm this kind of truth. He says, Albert C. Knudsen says, the sole Godhead of Yahweh was a truth that was only gradually attained. It was to Moses that the establishment of Yahweh worship was due. Previous to his time, the Israelites seem to have been polytheists. So that was really, again, the experience of the prophetic Hebrew tradition. And then from polytheism, they moved into henotheism. From polytheism, they moved into henotheism. And henotheism in this context means there are many gods, but one God is higher than the other gods. In the Hebrew tradition, they thought Yahweh is the supreme God, but there were other gods. They did not believe in one God, supreme God, but they believed in other gods, but their God is better than the other gods. So this is called henotheism. But again, from henotheism, they moved into monotheism. From henotheism, they moved into monotheism, but there is only one supreme God who is the creator of the universe, and there are no other gods. Other gods are like a dust on the scales. Other gods are like a dust on the scales. There is only one God who is the creator of the universe. And this God is the God of the commandments, who reveals His will through the prophets and tells people what they should do, what they should not do. So in the Hebrew tradition, the evolution of the consciousness before Jesus was monotheism, in which they believed in one God. And the difference between Hindu Vedic tradition and the prophetic tradition, as the Hindu tradition, the Vedic tradition grew higher levels, they did not reject the lower levels, allowed them to exist according to the people's need, because they is not rejecting but growing one after the other. But in the prophetic tradition, as they were growing into the higher levels, somehow they rejected the lower levels, and they become very much exclusive. Whether you are here and you are not there, so somehow they tried to completely destroy the lower levels of relationship, and they wanted to hold on to their own relationship with God. Now, with Jesus Christ, the evolution of the consciousness in the Jewish tradition evolves further, because we know that God gave 10 commandments to Moses, but He also said, "Behold, the days are coming, I will make a new covenant with the people of Israel. I will write the law in the hearts of the people. From the least to the greatest, everybody knows God. There is no need one person telling to the other to know God, because everybody knows God, and I will be their God, and they will be my people." And so though they foresaw this new covenant, but they did not have this experience of the new covenant, something is going to happen in the future. And in the life of Jesus, the experience of God goes beyond monotheism. At the moment of His baptism, the heavens are opened and the Spirit of God comes upon Him, and He had the experience of God, in which God says, "You are my beloved Son." Then He says, "I am in the Father, and the Father is in me. I am in the Father, and the Father is in me. I am not a creature of God, but I am the Son of God. I am the Son of God." So the Jesus consciousness goes beyond monotheism. We can say it is like a pantheism, in the sense, I am not a creature of God, but I am the manifestation of God. And again, His consciousness does not remain there. It goes one step further, and then He says, "I and the Father are one. I and the Father are one." I am not only Son of God, I am not only the manifestation of God, I am not only the incarnation of God, but ultimately I and the Father are one. And this statement of Jesus is almost identical with the statement made by the Upanishadic sages 500 years before him, when they said, "I am Brahman, I and God are one." Okay. And this statement has to be understood carefully, because generally people interpret to mean, "Oh, this person is telling he is God. This person is telling he is God." It is not like that. Nobody can become another God, because there is only one God. It only means to recognize Ultimately, there is only one God. We all come from that one God and we all go back to that one God. It is not becoming another God. So it is a statement of great humility to recognize this one God who is the source of the whole creation, and the creation has the possibility to come from that source and go back to the source. And now, in the Bhagavad Gita, because the Upanishadic sages, they were very much preoccupied with this union with the divine. We have to discover we and God are one, and then everything comes to an end, and there is nothing more to do, nothing more to say. But the Bhagavad Gita tries to correct this extreme position, tries to integrate wisdom and action in law. You see, there are the Upanishadic sages propose the path of wisdom, realizing our oneness with God, and then everything is finished. But then the Bhagavad Gita says it is not enough to realize our oneness with God, but somehow we need to manifest that wisdom in our daily actions, daily relationship. And so love is wisdom manifesting in action. And that is really the essence of Bhagavad Gita, because Krishna is the symbol of wisdom and Arjuna is the symbol of action, and they are in the same chariot. Arjuna is acting according to Krishna, and Krishna is acting in and through Arjuna, and so there is a love between Krishna and Arjuna, and this is really the vision the Bhagavad Gita presents. It is not action, it is not wisdom alone, it is not devotion alone, but we have to bring them together into one, so that our human life is a kind of integral experience of wisdom, action, and love. And for me, it's a wonderful vision that Bhagavad Gita is a kind of complementing the Vedic tradition. Bhagavad Gita complements the spiritual evolution that happened in the Vedic tradition. Now we need to reflect what was the contribution of Jesus to his spiritual tradition. What was his contribution? Was he saying something new? Now for this we need to understand from the point of view of these two commandments of the Jewish tradition, the love of God and the love of neighbor. This is the strong point of the prophetic tradition, the relationship with God and the relationship with the neighbor. But at the time of Jesus, the spiritual understanding of Judaism, the love of God was dualistic love of God, in the sense God is the creator and we are the creatures. So there is a gulf between God and human beings, and that gulf cannot be built. It remains even after one's death. When people go to heaven, still there is a distance between God and human beings. And the love of neighbor also was very limited, because they thought the neighbor is only the fellow Jew. And that is why Jesus told them, love God and love neighbor. They asked him, who is my neighbor? Who is my neighbor? And Jesus tells the parable of the good Samaritan. A neighbor is one who is in need. So the spiritual experience of Jesus in his spiritual tradition, he elevates the love of God from creator-creature relationship into oneness with God. He began his spiritual journey as a creator and creature relationship with God. At the moment of his baptism, he goes beyond the creator-creature relationship and establishes the relationship, the Father and the Son, and then he goes one step higher and realizes I and the Father are one. So the contribution of Jesus to his spiritual tradition to elevate the love of God from the dualistic love of God into the non-dualistic love of God. And he expanded the love of neighbor from the dualistic love of neighbor again to the non-dualistic love of neighbor. And so the two important statements of Jesus are, I and the Father are one, and whatever you do to the least of my brothers and sisters, that you do unto me. And these are really the essence of his teaching, and which I call it the radical love of God and the radical love of neighbor. So he elevated the love of God and he expanded the love of neighbor. But this experience was impossible in his spiritual tradition. What he was proposing to his spiritual tradition was impossible according to their understanding of divine-human relationship. And for that he had to pay the price, which we see dying on the cross, because according to them he was blaspheming. He is making statements which are impossible in that spiritual understanding. But if Jesus might have gone to India at that time and told the Indian sages, I and the Father are one, they should have accepted him without any difficulty. Because it was their understanding. So they might have accepted him as a great master, great teacher. But it is a difficulty to the prophetic tradition. Now why the difficulty? Because in the prophetic tradition, all the three religions, Judaism, Islam and Christianity, I'm not speaking about the mystical tradition of these religions, but the traditional understanding of these religions, that God is the creator and human beings are creatures of God. And they are created out of nothing, so there will be always a gulf between God and human beings. And in the Vedic tradition, God is not the creator, but God is the manifester of this creation. The creation is the manifestation of this creation. And so the creation has the possibility to enter into God and realize oneness with God. And that is why the statements of Jesus are really a problem to Judaism, problem to Islam, and problem to Christianity also. In the sense, they accepted these statements only for Jesus Christ, but they deny the same experience to the Christians. So according to suppose if you ask the question, who is a human being? According to Judaism, human being is a creature of God. According to Christianity, human being is a creature of God. According to Islam, human being is a creature of God. But in Christianity, there is a difference between Christ and a Christian. A Christian is a human being, creature of God, but Christ is not a creature of God, but Christ is the Son of God and he is one with God. So Christianity has two positions, so one for Christ and one for Christians. But Islam is one position for all. And that's why they say Jesus Christ is nothing but a human being. He is like any other human. He may be a prophet, but it doesn't mean he is higher than a human being. He is also a creature of God like any other creature of God. But according to Hindu tradition, especially the Vedic, the Upanishadic tradition, human beings are not creatures of God, but they are one with God. And this is really the most important difference between the Vedic understanding of human being and the prophetic understanding of a human being. And Jesus Christ somehow stands between these two positions. For example, if you tell to a Hindu, Jesus Christ said, I and the Father are one, they will say, wonderful, we are very happy you have somebody who can say that. And they will ask you, is it possible for every Christian to say the same thing? And if you say, no Christian can say that, only Christ can say that, because Christians are only creatures of God, and then they will say, you don't have good news to us. You don't have good news to us, because in our tradition, it is possible for everybody to come to this realization. It is not limited to one particular individual. Okay? And this is really the problem when you have inter-religious dialogue between Hinduism and Christianity, because they accept everything that Jesus said, but they say it is a possibility for everybody. It's not only limited to Jesus Christ. And so now if you say what is truth according to Jesus, for me the truth of Jesus Christ, if you want to put like this, and you have the cross, it is the radical love of God, the radical love of neighbor, the 100% love of God and the 100% love of neighbor. That means in our relationship with God, we have to grow from the individual love of God into the collective love of God, from the collective to the universal love of God, from the universal into the divine love. And also our love of neighbor also, it has to grow from the individual love of God into the collective love of God, from the collective love of neighbor to the universal love of neighbor, and ultimately you see every human being, every creature is the manifestation of God. And so for Jesus, truth is this radical love of God and the radical love of neighbor, which he described as the kingdom of God. Kingdom of God. And the kingdom of God is the experience of the radical love of God and the radical love of neighbor. And that is why when Jesus told to Pilate, I came to bear witness to the truth, I understand he was telling, I came to bear witness to the kingdom of God. And this kingdom of God is nothing but this radical love of God and radical love of neighbor. In me, the journey has taken full. Nobody can go beyond this level in relationship with God. Nobody can go beyond this level in my relationship with the neighbor. Okay. And now when we come to Hindu tradition, and something else similar happened to in Hindu tradition also, because they also speak about the truth. You know, the truth has different levels. So the first word is Sat. Sat. And then the second word is Satyam. And it's very interesting, these two words. Now Sat means a reality which exists by itself. Okay? And there is only one Sat. There is only one God. Ekam Sat. So in that sense, truth is God. Truth is God. Truth is eternal. Truth is infinite. Okay? And the word Satyam is the combination of the three letters Sat, Ti, and Yam. Sat, Ti, and Yam. Now Sat means infinite. Sat means infinite, eternal, unlimited. And Ti means finite. Ti means finite, the creation, the names and the forms, which has the beginning and the end. And Am means union of Sat and Ti. It is the union of the infinite and the finite. That is really Satyam. Okay. So in the Upanishads, they speak about 4 levels of consciousness: the individual consciousness, the collective consciousness, the universal consciousness, and the divine consciousness. We can also see in the life of Jesus also, individual, the collective, and the universal, and the divine. Because our spiritual growth begins with the individual consciousness, and then we enter into the collective consciousness, identifying with the religions or belief systems, whatever it may be. And from there we move into the universal consciousness, and from there we move into the divine consciousness. So these are archetypal relationships with God, from the individual, the collective, the universal, and the divine. And the Bhagavad Gita tries to make this cross. It is not only vertical relationship with God, but also horizontal relationship with God. It's not enough that you realize your oneness with God, but you also have to manifest that oneness in the human relationships in action. But of course, the Bhagavad Gita is presented in the context of the battlefield, where there is a fight between good and the bad, and so the good in a way destroys the bad with the help of God. And so sometimes the emphasis on the love of neighbor, the social transformation, is not very much given there, because it is proposing an action that comes from wisdom, but it is really bringing together this the wisdom and action in love relationship. Now, for me, in that sense, there is a kind of same vision is discovered in the Vedic tradition, and also we see the same vision discovered in the person of Jesus Christ. It is this marriage of wisdom and action in love. Now, what is really the subtle difference between the Vedic vision and the vision of Christ? And for me, it is the theory of karma and reincarnation. The karma and reincarnation. Because the Vedic tradition proposes the theory of karma and reincarnation. But again, we have to distinguish between belief in karma and reincarnation, which is, they have seen it as a kind of a process that is going on, but the experience of the sages themselves went beyond karma and reincarnation, because when a person realizes I and Brahman are one, I and God are one, and this person is completely free from karma and reincarnation, because there is no more the ego that is being continuity. It is God manifesting in and through this individual. So all the actions become the actions of God, and so the person is not bound by any karma or reincarnation. But the sages saw there is a movement going on in the human consciousness, individually and also collectively, a movement from the past into the present and into the future, that they called it karma and reincarnation. And they proposed the people that you have to go beyond the karma and reincarnation. As long as you are remaining in your ego, either individual ego or collective ego, you are bound by this karma and reincarnation. But if you offer yourself to God completely, then God takes over your life in such a way that all your actions become actions of God. Then you are not bound by karma and reincarnation. There is a beautiful statement in the Isha Upanishad. It says, actions done in God do not bind the soul of a human being. Actions done in God do not bind the soul of a human being. So do not be afraid of doing any action, because they were afraid of doing action because of the karma and reincarnation. He said, don't be afraid. If you surrender yourself to God completely, then you are completely free from karma and reincarnation. Then your life becomes the life of God. I think later somehow people began to emphasize so much on this karma and reincarnation, and if you want to be Hindu, you have to believe in karma and reincarnation. And that belief becomes in a way somehow blocks the socially transformative action. It blocks the socially transformative action. And when we come to Jesus Christ, at one point they ask him, why this person is born blind? In one incident, his disciples ask him, why this person is born blind? Is it because of his sin or sin of his ancestors? It is like a karma and reincarnation theory, okay, something like that. Either he is responsible or his ancestors are responsible. We are not responsible. So when we have these theories, they give a kind of protection to us. Suppose if I have this theory of karma, reincarnation, when I see somebody suffering there, this is his karma, his responsibility. I am not responsible. I go home and sleep peacefully. But Jesus gave an answer. He said, this person is not born because of his sin or his ancestors, but this person is born blind to manifest the glory of God. And for me, it is a revolutionary answer. Now, what does it mean? Why this blind person is a manifestation of God? And for me, suppose if a person who is able to see encounters a blind person and do not have any theories, karma, reincarnation, and allows this blind person to touch him or touch her, and this blind person may awaken love, compassion, sharing, sacrifice in this person. So there is a kind of giving and receiving. The blind person receives, and then the person who is able to see gives. So in this relationship, there is giving and receiving. And in this relationship, the blind person sees God in the person who is able to see, and the person who is able to see sees God in the blind person. And for both of them, it would be an experience of God. So Jesus was telling to his disciple, don't ask the question why this person is born blind, because you are asking the wrong question. If you ask the wrong question, you get the wrong answer. Because you are looking for an explanation why this person is born. You are putting yourself completely out of the situation so that you are not touched by it, and you are trying to create a kind of theory which will give you a protection from this kind of situations. But Jesus was telling, ask the question how this encounter can help you to awaken the divine within you. because God is love, God is compassion, God is sacrifice, God is sharing. And in this person, God is dead. God is dead because of the theory that we have created. God is dead. But if you do not have the protection of any theory, you are vulnerable. And in that vulnerability, you discover the divine in you, and you discover the divine in the other. And so Jesus gave this revolutionary answer that there will be all these kind of dichotomies in this world, but they are all meant to help each other to awaken the divine, so that we can discover the indwelling presence of God and manifest the divine attributes in our relationship. And for me, this is something very kind of something original, I would say, the original approach of Jesus. I would not say that Jesus denies the karma and reincarnation theory. I think there is an element of truth in it. Because if a person is smoking too much, this person may get cancer. Or drinking too much, this person may get cancer. So there is a consequence for every action that we do. So there is an action, there is a cause, and there is also effect. And so we cannot deny this process of karma and reincarnation, which is a continuity from the past to the present and in the future. But the way Jesus reacting to this phenomenon is not to create a theory, but use these kind of situations to awaken the divine within you. So the way he looks at this phenomenon is different, but he does not deny the karma and the reincarnation, according to me. But the way he approaches this reality is different. And for me, in this sense, there is a unity of the vision, the Vedic vision, and also the vision of Jesus Christ. And for me, the difference is very marginal. The difference is marginal because today the Hindu tradition, the Hindu thinkers no longer look things like a karma and reincarnation, even if they believe, because they want to transform the society. They want to help the poor. They want to liberate the people. There is a great sage we have today called Amma. You might have heard Amma, hugging mother, who said, if it is the karma of somebody who falls into a pit, it is the karma of the others to bring that person out of the pit. It's a very, very wonderful kind of answer that she gave. That means don't look at the negative situations of the others as something negative, but to make use of those situations to help the divine within yourself. So in that sense, the difference between the vision of Jesus Christ and the Vedic vision are for me the almost. Now the question is, what is truth? For me, truth is God. Truth is God. Ultimately, there is only one truth. There is only one God. We can say only God is truth. But when we come to our truth, the human truth, we are ultimately one with the divine. We are ultimately one with the divine, in which a person can say, I and God are one. It doesn't mean a human being becomes God, but it is realizing only one God, and we all come that one God, and we go back to that one God. But we are also fully human. In the Christian tradition, they speak about Jesus Christ as fully human and fully divine. He is 100% divine. He is also 100% human. And of course, a Christian is 100% human, but not 100% divine. So the Hindu tradition emphasizes very much on the divinity of our human nature. The emphasis on our divine nature. You have to discover that you are one with the divine. And of course, the prophetic religions emphasize so much on the humanness. You are a creature. You are nobody. You are nothing. You always remain separate from God. And somehow Jesus Christ is building the bridge between these two things. At one level, we are one with the divine. At also another level, we are also human being. And the human nature should be a vehicle for the divine. The human nature is a vehicle for the divine. Like Arjuna is a vehicle for Krishna. So also our human nature, the individual ego, should be a vehicle for the divine. In that way, there is a union of the divine and the human. We are fully human at one level, but we are also fully divine at the other level. So it is the integration of the divine and the human in a way that is Satyam, if you like, Satyam is the integration of the divine and also the creation. And for me, this is not only the union of the divine and the creation, but it's also a relationship. Human life is a relationship. And that brings out very beautifully in the celebration of the Eucharist. For me, Jesus summarized his experience, his truth in the Eucharist. And the Eucharist is elevating the bread and the wine into the divine, so that the bread and the wine become the body and the blood of God. That means elevating our limited human consciousness into the divine consciousness. And then we have to bring it down again to the human level, and then we need to give to each other, this is my body, take and eat. This is my blood, take and drink. This is the love of neighbor. So the essence of the Eucharist, it is the radical love of God and the radical love of neighbor. 100% love of God, 100% love of neighbor. And Jesus described with a beautiful parable. He said, the kingdom of God is like a woman who took yeast and put in 3 measures of meal until it was leavened. The kingdom of God is like a woman who took yeast and put in 3 measures of meal until it was leavened. And the yeast is the symbol of the divine, the flour is the symbol of the humanity and the creation. When the yeast enters into the flour is completely leavened. So also when the divine spirit enters into us, all our human nature is divinized. So that the human becomes the divine becomes the human. And that is the experience of the kingdom of God. And all our human relationships are based on this experience of the unity, because we are all one in the divine unity, but we are also functionally we are all different from each other, the physical level. So we need to relate in this loving relationship with one another, manifesting this unity in our relationship. And so for me, the truth is realizing our essential oneness with God and living that unity functionally in our human loving relationship. And that is for me the miracle of our human existence. I think I stop there, and if you like to ask any questions or clarifications. Please.
Yeah, thank you very much for this. Thank you very much for this fantastic and fascinating lecture. You've shown, or you just showed us these different interpretations in a mountain form. So I wonder if it is a mountain, there is some hierarchy. So what comes next? What do you think is the next interpretation?
Now I think, you see, as an evolution, we cannot go beyond that. Okay? And the next will be coming down. And that is what we see also in the Hindu tradition. See, they have this profound truth in the Vedas and the Bhagavad Gita, but then they in the 7th century or 8th century, we have a system of Advaita system, you see, proposed by Shankara, and the focus is our oneness with the divine. And then in 11th century, we have another philosopher called Ramanuja. He said, no, we are not one with God. We are sons of God. We are manifestations of God, but we are not one with God. So he brings it down a little bit again here. And then in 13th century, another philosopher called Madhva, his system is called dualism. He said, we are completely different from God. We cannot say we and God are one. We cannot say we are sons and daughters of God, but we are more like creatures of God. So again, it brings down again to this level. You see, 500 years before Christ, they have reached this oneness with the divine. And 13th century after Christ, they have come to the dualistic interpretation of the religion. So there is always this process of moving and coming. But I think if we are able to keep a kind of integral view of our spiritual evolution, that we have to begin with the dualistic understanding of God, then we grow into the qualified non-dualistic interpretation, and then we go into the non-dualistic, and then we have to come back to dualism, but then we have to be both integrating the non-dualism and also the dualism. Okay, I think that always keeps a kind of ascending and also descending, because one generation may be very much focused on the Advaita, and the next generation will come down to the lower level, and the next generation will come down, because we cannot begin what other people have achieved. We have to begin where our situation is, and so we bring down that higher experience into our level of experience, and so then again we have to go back to that experience.
But there does seem to be one slight difference today, that every single one of those stages on your mountain had some concept that there was a divine presence. But we are in a culture where the very idea of a divine presence is becoming rare. Could you say something about that?
Very good. Thank you. Thank you for this question. Now, I think it's very important, the question Nick has asked. For me, we can divide this truth into two levels. One is the historical truth and the eternal truth. The historical truth and the eternal truth. The historical truth is very much comprises these levels. The historical truth in the sense God manifesting in the human history in different levels according to the level of the human beings until monotheism. But then at the level of monotheism, God is presented as an authority who commands people, do this and don't do that, who demands the obedience of the will and the intellect. And as the human consciousness grows, human beings feel this God is an authoritative God. And as long as this God exists, human beings cannot have freedom. And from that comes the philosophy of the death of God. God is dead. Agnosticism, atheism and secularism are really a kind of rebelling against this concept of a God who is a God of authority, a God who demands the submission of the will and the intellect. Because secularism wants freedom to think, freedom to act, and freedom to will. And as long as God exists, human beings cannot have this freedom, because God has already decided what human beings should do and should not do. We need to correspond ourselves to the will of God, but we have no freedom. And this is really the point of the atheist. And I remember reading where Jean-Paul Sartre, an existential atheistic philosopher, who said, I don't want to deny the existence of God, but if God does not exist, then I can be free. I can decide what I want to do. And for me, the human consciousness has to grow from the God of history into the God of eternity. And that is what happened to Jesus at the moment of his baptism. For example, when Moses asked God his name, first God said, I am who I am. And that is the eternal aspect of the truth. But God also said, I am the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. And that is the historical aspect of truth. So the truth has these two aspects, the historical and the eternal. So at the moment of Jesus' baptism, Jesus goes from the God of history into the God of eternity, where God is no longer the God of commandments, a God who tells you do this and don't do that, but a God who reveals who human beings are. And that becomes the way, the truth, and the life. And God becomes completely silent and is a God of freedom. And for me today, the atheism and secularism are really breaking the whole concept of God. And for me, it is a very, very important phenomenon, which is a necessary phenomenon for the next evolution of the of the human consciousness, because by completely denying the God of history, the human consciousness is emerging into the God of eternity, which I call this experience as the new covenant. He said, God said, behold, the days are coming, I will make a new covenant with the people of Israel. I will write the law in the hearts of the people. From the least to the greatest, everybody knows God. There is no need one person telling to the other, because everybody knows God. And for me, the human consciousness today, by denying the God of history, is really longing to give birth to this God of eternity. For me, atheism and secularism are the deep longing of the human heart to realize the full potentiality that we have the capacity to go beyond religions and discover the truth within ourselves, so that we can proclaim like Jesus Christ, I am the way, the truth, and the life. Because if we are in the religion, then religion is the way, the truth, and the life. But in the new covenant, there is no truth outside, it is truth inside. I am the way, the truth, and the life. And God becomes completely silent. He is the God of the presence and the God of the freedom. I think this is the really, it's like I would say, is a pregnant woman giving birth to the human consciousness. At this particular moment, the human consciousness, like a pregnant woman giving birth to the human beings into a new level of consciousness, awareness, is no longer a birth of a new religion, a birth of a new human consciousness, a new human being, which I consider that Jesus Christ inaugurated 2000 years ago, because he did not come to start a new religion, but he came to start a new human consciousness, a new human being who can declare, I am the way, the truth, and the life.
Thank you for a magnificent answer.
Hello, thank you for an interesting talk. I'd just like to add something to what you said about the Muslim attitude towards Jesus. It's true that Islam regards Jesus as just a man, but I think also within Christianity we can acknowledge the two natures of Christ. There's Jesus the man, and Christ, the Son of God, the divinity. Now, in the Quran, which for Muslims is regarded as the Word of God, Jesus is referred to as Ruh Allah, which means the Spirit of God. And also, when there's this denial of the crucifixion and resurrection, which the average Muslim uses to support the idea that Jesus was just a man, it's actually a quotation. It says, like the God speaking, says that they said, and this they are the Jews that were hostile to Christ, that sought the death of Christ, or Jesus rather, as far as they were concerned. They said they thought they killed him, but they killed him not. Now, yes, the thing is, well, I was just going to make an addition. The thing that they could not kill Ruh Allah, you see, because the Spirit of God, just the same way as like Christ cannot be killed, whereas Jesus the man died on the cross. Otherwise, there would never have been the resurrection. You can only resurrect a dead body, I think. Am I right?
If that is helps you to understand these things, it's okay. But I think there is a basic problem between Christianity and Islam, because as I said, the Christians believe that Jesus Christ is the Son of God, and he is also not only Son of God, but he is one with God. The Father and I are one, and this is a blasphemy to Islam. It's a blasphemy to the Jewish people, and this is the basic fact that we have to. It's not enough to make different explanations, but we have to face the reality that whether a Muslim or a Jew is willing to accept Jesus as one with God.
No, but what I was saying is the Quran accepts Jesus, the average Muslim not.
Yeah.
But the Quran accepts Jesus as the Spirit of God.
Yeah.
And as far as the spiritual economy of Islam can go, which has to stress the unicity of God, the aloneness of God, it's virtually saying the same thing.
No, I don't think it is. It's because my own understanding of Islam, I have read the Quran and I know what the Muslims think about it. For example, when Jesus said he is the Son of God, they say everybody is a son of God. Everybody is a daughter of God. It's not he is not the only Son of God, but he is only a Son of God. So it applies to it's a metaphor, But I think there are deeper things we need to. I'm sorry. I just explained to you. I just want to use the symbol of a tree. See, our human consciousness goes into 4 levels of relationship with God, I said. First one is the individual relationship. We are all like leaves on the tree, and our relationship with is like individual relationship. The second one is the collective relationship. The branches represent religions, okay? The collective consciousness. The moment I identify I'm a Christian, I belong to a particular branch. So here our relationship with God is a collective relationship, not individual. And the trunk is the symbol of the universal consciousness. And the roots are the symbol of the divine. So in the Christ evolution of consciousness, he began as an individual, as Jesus. And then he grows into the collective consciousness of Judaism. He is a Jew. At the moment of his baptism, he moves from the collective consciousness into the universal consciousness. And there he is the only Son of God. It is not a physical person, it's a level of consciousness. At that level, a person is identified with the whole humanity and the whole creation and embracing all the branches and the leaves. Here we can have millions of sons and daughters of God. And here we can have maybe 20, 30 collective sons and daughters of God. But here we have the only Son of God or daughter of God. It's not so much of the gender, masculine or feminine, but we call it Christ consciousness. And finally, he is one with God. And so it's very important that in one level of consciousness, he is the only Son of God in the sense he has this all-embracing consciousness. It also means that each one of us have to begin our journey as the individual sons and daughters of God. And then we have to grow into the collective sons and daughters of God. Then we have to grow into the Son and daughter of God. And finally, we have to enter into the unity with the divine. I think this is very important. Unfortunately, our Christian tradition does not present. They say he is the only Son of God exclusively. And that becomes a problem. But when Jesus said, I am the Son of God, he is not telling in an exclusive sense. In one level of consciousness, everybody has this possibility of realizing himself or herself as the Son of God or the daughter of God. And then we have the possibility again seeing unity with the divine. I think this is, for me, is very important when you have a dialogue with Islam and Judaism, because in the Sufi tradition of Islam and the Kabbalah tradition of Islam, I think they have a universal level of consciousness. In Sufism, they call it universal man who goes beyond these collective levels. And so it's something we need to discuss about it. It's not enough to say Jesus is a Son of God and everybody is a Son of God. It's not so simple.
We've got time for one more question.
The more I heard you speak, I'm aware that one of the challenges for me as a priest is that Jesus holds no official position in the religious community that he comes from. And I wonder, therefore, if part of the challenge for Christians in trying to raise and develop that universal consciousness is actually the people who guard and who lead it.
Now I said, for me, the primary mission of Jesus Christ was to inaugurate this new human consciousness. It's not with religion. That was not his mission. Because if he starts a new religion, he is creating another collective consciousness, which is excluding the others. It's not going to really help humanity. But he came to inaugurate according to the plan of God. It's not against the plan of God, because God spoke about the new covenant, the new human being. And of course, he thought his spiritual tradition will cooperate with his plan. But he realized his spiritual tradition was not cooperating with his plan. And so he had to form a group of his disciples, a nucleus of his disciples, as a nest where a birth of this new human consciousness can be facilitated. And so for me, for Jesus, religion is like a nest. He said, I have not come to abolish the law, but I came to fulfill the law. And the Sabbath is made for human beings, but not human beings for the sake of the Sabbath. These are revolutionary statements. That means if you substitute the word religion for Sabbath, religions are meant to be at the service of human beings and not human beings at the service of religion. Again, I have not come to abolish religion, but I came to fulfill religion. And so it is transforming the religion from being a cage into a nest, and that was his second mission, that so that the religion can facilitate the birth of this new human consciousness, not to hold the human beings only for itself, but only give birth to the human beings into the new consciousness. I think this is something should happen to Christianity today, I would say, because so far Christianity is really conceiving, but she's not giving birth to anybody. Just imagine a woman who conceives and gives for 2,000 years in the womb. The greatness of any religion does not consist how many followers she has or he has, but how many followers she has given birth into the freedom of the infinite space. I think for me the call of God to religions today, particularly Christianity in the Europe, through atheism and secularism and agnosticism, is to become a mother who gives birth to a higher level of consciousness, but not to try to keep everybody in her womb. And in a way, if a womb doesn't give birth, a womb becomes a tomb. It's a very, very serious thing I'm speaking about you. If a womb does not give birth, it becomes a tomb. And sometimes the religion can become a tomb. People enter into religion and never come out. And this is really challenge of Jesus to religions, to become mothers, not to just remain pregnant women, but to become mothers and give birth to the higher consciousness, to the human beings. Thanks.
Ladies and gentlemen, that's it. But I must say, I don't know what you felt, but an absolutely fascinating talk, which I just wish we could go on with more questions, because there seems to me something very, very interesting about that whole business of secularism and agnosticism with which our society is absolutely riddled. And I think Brother Martin has given us some very, very interesting things to think about. I can't thank you enough. Really appreciate it. Thank you so much.